I always encourage people that are interested in Irish music to start at the very beginning, um, to look at the way the music is being expressed in the cities, towns, and countryside of Ireland, because folk music changes with every generation. It's also subject to influences from other cultures and traditions, and it's never static. So you have to recognise that, and I always encourage young people that are coming into Irish music to take what's most powerful: the melody, the rhythms, and the passion of song, the storytelling, the history, and embrace it all, and you'll find yourself what you like best. I think there's probably more facilities in Ireland now than when I was young to the learning of music and the practice of music. That wasn't around when we were young. We generally were all self-taught, and in our locality and district in Ireland, there would have been very, very few professional teachers. So, but music always indeed was present in locations in Ireland, even through the worst periods of oppression and during the hunger, that it survived through all the catastrophic events of our history. But the 19th century had a particularly bad effect on our Irish music, because the audience for its character, which were the poor of Ireland, largely disappeared and were starved to death. They were the bulk of the appreciative audience that understood the ballad tradition, understood the street performers, understood the way songs that were transmitted around the country. They were the audience for that, and I think George Petrie deals with that in his literature. He said famously, he said, the land of song is no longer singing, it's silent. And if I hear a cry, it's only the wail for the dead. Now, Petrie was absolutely horrified in the 1850s at the demise of the musical tradition because of the social effects of the hunger. So he set about to go around Ireland and collect the remnants, as he saw it. And his student, the man who helped him, P.W. Joyce, Patrick Weston Joyce, he between them they collected over 5,000 tunes and songs. But that would have only been a remnant of what was lost during the events of the hunger. You have to imagine, you have to understand that there were almost 10 million people in Ireland, half of the population of the whole of Britain, in 1845. That's estimated. The British authorities didn't keep any figures for those who left Ireland and went to Britain during that time. We do know the people who left Ireland and came to America. They brought the tradition to America, and it enriched the folk song tradition of America. You'll find in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s entertainment in the big cities where the Irish gathered. There was a lot of Irish music. The ability to be a good performer, a good writer of songs on topical events, a lot of that disappeared with the hunger, with the starvation. It had a catastrophic effect on the creativity of the music, and you'll see that when you look at the compositions, say from the 1820s, 30s, 40s. In the 50s, they become less artistic and less in tune with the tastes of the people. But the amazing thing about the music is that it was enjoyed by all strata of society. The people at the higher end of the scale loved the music, and the lower end of the social scale loved the music. Didn't have social borders, and that's always been the case, even going back to the 18th century, when the nobility were in Ireland. They fostered the musicians and the performers, and they were a big reason why the harping tradition survived in the 18th century, because it was the big houses, it was the big landlords who were patriotic aristocracy. You have to remember there were many Irish people in Ireland in the 18th century that believed, like the people who founded the revolution here in this country, in America, that there had to be a better way to treat the people. And the American Revolution had huge consequences for Ireland, because the British authorities knew they had lost the American colonies because of the Irish fighting in George Washington's ranks, and they were determined not to lose the breadbasket, which was considered Ireland. So there was ruthless brutality applied to anybody who followed the Republican aspirations of George Washington or any of the people in France. Mm-hmm. Like the reason that we call the band Wolf Tones, we called it after a man from that period who sought to unite Ireland under the same principles as the founding fathers of this country. And the Wolf Tone was it came to America here in 1795. But what is very interesting is that he was entertained before he left Ireland by William Bunting. Bunting actually gathered all the musicians in Belfast to entertain Wolf Tone before he left to America. Wolf Tone seen the cultural going alongside the political. In other words, that he wanted the people that had been descendants of the English settlers to embrace the Irish culture. Mm-hmm. English authority didn't like this. So Bunting was written out of history, right? Because of his support for a Republican aspirations in Ireland. And when he died in the 1830s, George Petrie remarked that he died without a word uttered or written in his favour by any pen, publication or person. Now, the English authorities had so powerfully denationalised the upper classes after the Act of Union that they had denationalised them. Their plan was to make Irish people English. Mm-hmm. In the 1830s, Petrie, who, along with Eugene O'Curry, John O'Donovan, realised that although English authority had suppressed the culture of Ireland and the tradition, they hadn't succeeded in destroying it. It was underground, right? Now, this might come as a shock to you. Like in the late 18th century and early 19th century, the Irish people were far from being illiterate. There were head schools all over the country. There were penny schools in towns and cities. Although the mass of the Irish people were denied education by the English authorities, they were far from being illiterate. And to understand that, I would suggest that you get a book called The Head Schools of Ireland, written by a man called Dowling, to understand the way education was so revered in Irish society that they refused to let go of it. Refused to let go of it. It's the most powerful statement of our nationality. The most powerful statement. The transition from Gaelic into English was a very, very gradual process. For the first 300 or 400 years, all English settlers and Norman settlers took up the Irish language. Irish was the dominant culture. It's only when the English tried to destroy and murder all the Irish people and expel them from the country that English took over. But it was confined to the cities up until the end of the 17th century. But then even in the 18th century, the Irish language made a comeback because, again, the underground educational system was teaching Latin, Hebrew, Greek in schools that were not served by any government. This is a phenomenal case for Irish education. And along with that, of course, you had the Bardic schools had survived right from the very earliest part of our civilization. They never really died down until the 18th century. So, well, I was definitely influenced by the Clancy brothers and Tommy Macon. And I think Pete Seeger would have influenced me in the fact that he could speak out and sing out. And I always felt that it was part of, I learned very fast that it was part of the Bardic tradition to be able to write and sing critically of injustice where you've seen it, to write and sing about and praise of things that you see and needed to be celebrated. So that was a very old part of Irish heritage. Just one interesting thing, just to remind you, George Petrie got permission from the English government. They funded, he got a Major Larcombe set up a memoir to collect the folk memories, songs, stories, to mark all the important sites of history in the counties of Ireland. And the first county that was chosen to do this was County Derry, sadly. And it revealed such a powerful heritage that they closed it. It revealed such a powerful heritage that was all underground. And in an act of racism and an act of hatred, the memo was closed down, saying it was lack of funds. But there was no lack of funds because they compensated the slave owners when slavery was abolished in 1833 to the tune of millions. The English Exchequer was full of money. But they didn't want to reveal in all the other counties the powerful nature of the music, song, poems, education that was in the counties. And we'll never know what was lost. But one thing was found from County Derry that everybody in America knows, and that is the tune O'Cahon's Lament, or Danny Boy. That was one of the pieces of music that was found because of George Petrie. So you wouldn't have Danny Boy you wouldn't have that melody. One of his people he had around the country had a blind fiddler playing the tune called O'Cahan's Lament, and she wrote to, she took down the notation and she sent it to George Petrie. And lots of people wrote words to it then, including Fred Weatherly, who wrote the Danny Boy words. Oh, the role of the singer, I always feel, well, from my perspective, is to tell a story, to reveal to the audience the purpose of the song. If it's about love, if it's about injustice, if it's about, but to do it in an entertaining way. And you know, I'm really a street singer. You know, that has been, because the singers and that entertained on the streets of Ireland prior to the hunger, they had to have songs that were topical, songs that were entertaining, to entertain the crowds, to make a living. They had to, and they would sell the sheets of the words for a penny, and they'd sell them to the people surrounding the area. But of course the English sought to bring in a law then forbidding the balladeers from selling the sheets. They used to sell the straw. They used to bring pieces of straw, and they would sell the straws for a penny and give the words free. And there's a very famous Dublin ballad singer called Zosimus, and he used to hold a straw up and said, "This is no ordinary Irish straw. This is repeal of the Union straw." The repeal of the Union was a campaign to have the Parliament restored to Dublin by Dan O'Connell, who placed his faith in the democratic system. But of course the British wouldn't have any, and they eventually humiliated him, and they threatened. He's the first man in the world to mobilize massive crowds in agitation for political change. 1 million people he brought into meetings to have the Parliament restored, and the British snubbed him, made little of him, and he died a humiliated man. They put him in prison, and they told him that if his last assembly was put together in Dublin in 1843, that they would open the guns of the British Army and Navy on the assembled people, and the blood would be on his hands. So when Zosimus was singing his songs in the 30s, in the 1830s, he was holding up the straw saying, "This is no ordinary Irish straw. This is repeal of the Union straw. It's a penny, and you can have the words free." In the 16th and 16th and 17th century, the British introduced the law. They murdered the harpers, executed them. So they brought in a law that if any rhymers, as they used to call them, were caught singing songs about Ireland, they would be executed. So what they did was, the bards decided then they would write the songs in and use a woman as Ireland. So we have lots of great patriotic songs that are really about Ireland, but celebrate women's names. So that's how they got around that. The conservatoires that existed, like in France, in Holland, and Germany, and Austria, and the fostering of the arts, we didn't have that in Ireland. And had we had the ingredients, as you probably know, like all the great composers, European composers, they used like the Dvořák, the Czech composer, the Chopin. They all used the folk music of the localities. Yeah. But we didn't have those conservatoires in Ireland to give it. And as Samuel Beckett said, the great Irish playwright and author, he said it's hard to think about creativity when you're starving in a ditch. He said, and that was the case with the people in the 19th century. And you should look up the words of Trevelyan, who was the minister in charge of the Irish food during the starvation, and he was such a bigoted idiot, a bully, and for his work in thinning the population of Ireland, he was of course given a knighthood, which are really despicable character of the English authority. That they would give a man who was responsible for the human disposal of over 1.5 million people. There are many people in Ireland that see what I do and Bardic people like me as keeping alive the history, right? It was said of me during the Troubles in Ireland that if I only stopped singing songs, all the conflict will go away with England. If I stopped singing, everything would be grand. So the songs for many people in Irish authority became the object of censorship. And because of the powerful nature of our music, and the powerful nature and the love that the ordinary Irish people have for the songs, this was considered as a threat, right? So these people were misguided, and they followed slavishly the practices that are of control of culture in England. Nothing in England comes from the bottom up. Nothing. Everything is controlled from the top down. In Irish society, it's always been different. Things come from the bottom. In American society, you wouldn't have jazz, you wouldn't have blues if things didn't come from the bottom. There was no government directive to say that it's so. In England, it's very, very culturally, it's a wasteland in many ways because of that their ability to control culture and tradition, so it stifles creativity at a very, very local and community level. But in Ireland, that's, despite the fact that the government in Ireland introduced and banned me from the airwaves, so I couldn't get on radio because what I was saying was too truthful, and they don't like to hear it, So, any type of censorship in society is a recognition that a community is not at peace with itself, and will never be. We've witnessed many countries around the world where you have these, draconian legislation to prevent a speech that is critical or in reminding, as I do, reminding the Irish people of their proud heritage, and also reminding the world of the polished brutality of English oppression. A lot of negative forces have been applied to Irish music to promote it just musically without the baggage of words. In other words, they have the melodies there, but don't tell anybody what they say. So and that's so those indeed in who set artistic standards in Ireland. For that reason, a lot of them are what I would call arty-farties, and the arty-farties, they don't like the fact that the commonality of music comes from the bottom, that gives expression sometimes to powerful artistic creativity, and it's been so much part of our heritage for generations. It's not going to go away. A lot of people in Dublin will just play the music, they won't sing the songs. They've been conditioned into believing that their songs in some way are offensive to English people. They're only offensive to English people because of their ignorance of history, and they don't know anything about Ireland. And like the British government or the English government rather have always kept the mass of their people in ignorance. They are fed what they want them to feed, and so the mass of the English people. Well, I worked in England when I was young, and most English people I have no problem with. With English people, I get on fine with them, never had any problem with them. Mm-hmm. But it's very different talking to English people than English authority. Mm-hmm. English authority is totally different. The ordinary English people who have sympathies with Ireland and would like to see England's involvement with Ireland out of it completely, the majority of English people don't want England in Ireland. Yeah. But that's never been given expression by English authority or English power. And you have to understand that. Mm-hmm. And Irish people get on very well with English people, no problem. Mm-hmm. It's only when it comes to authority. The authority is there for strategic and for interests in our country, and it's there indeed to promote division, to prevent the rise of the country. So it's a policy that's been there for the last 500 years. And looking at Theresa May, it's not going to change anytime soon. She's a bully, and everyone she has around her is a bully. I think Irish pubs became part of the way people celebrated because we didn't have, as I said, the expressions of concert halls, institutes in the 19th century that gave expression to our musical tradition. The pub became a place of a performance. When I was young, you couldn't sing a song in a Dublin pub. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't allow you to sing a song. Our most popular songs, like A Nation Once Again, the Soldier Song, our national anthem, were all ballads. They were all written by ordinary people. So, you know, when Irish people celebrate, they don't sing U2, mm-hmm. They sing Irish songs. Mm-hmm. If they want to celebrate their identity, they sing Irish songs. Mm-hmm. So we never know what we owe to our music, because I believe, this is my own personal statement, I believe that we owe a great deal to our music. It has strengthened our nationality. It has, in many ways, it has preserved our identity. It has followed us around every part of the world, where Irish people settle, Australia, America, Canada, and when you name it, you'll find Irish music. And, you know, I say it every night, other nations have great monuments of stone to celebrate their heritage and tradition. We celebrate it in music because of a colonial past. Our monuments are our music. Our monuments are our songs, our ballads, and they could never be taken away from the Irish people, for they cost nothing except the lips of those who would sing and the ears of those who would listen.